Long before the philosophers of Greece, long before the Roman Senate debated laws, long before Europe's kings signed charters, there was Babylon, a city whose name would echo through the corridors of history, both as a symbol of splendor and of sin, of power and of pride. It was here, nearly 4,000 years ago, that a man rose to power who would forever alter humanity's understanding of justice. His name was Hammurabi. Picture the city in its youth, the Euphrates River winding through the Mesopotamian plain, carrying the lifeblood of trade and agriculture. The desert stretched endlessly around, yet here flourished a place of walls and markets, temples and shrines. The smell of clay ovens, the shouts of merchants, the chants of priests filled the air. Babylon was alive, growing, and restless. But behind its energy lay danger. Rival city-states clashed for dominance. Strong men imposed their will with swords. Disputes could spiral into blood feuds that lasted generations. It was a world where might often defined right. And yet, amid this chaos, one king imagined something different. This is the story of Hammurabi, and the code he carved into stone, the first great monument of written justice in human history. Hammurabi ascended the throne of Babylon around 1792 BCE. At that time, Babylon was not yet the mighty empire we imagine today. It was a modest city-state, overshadowed by the older and more powerful realms of Mesopotamia, Ishnuna, Larsa, Mari. To many, Babylon seemed just another contender in a crowded, violent land. But Hammurabi was not content with mediocrity. Patiently, cleverly, he strengthened Babylon. He built walls and canals, fortifying both his city's defenses and its lifeline of water. He formed alliances when it suited him, broke them when it did not. Over the decades of his rule, he expanded Babylon's reach through diplomacy, cunning, and at times ruthless war. By the end of his reign, Babylon had risen from obscurity to supremacy. Hammurabi had forged not just a city-state, but an empire stretching across much of Mesopotamia. And yet, Hammurabi was more than a conqueror. He understood something few kings had dared to articulate. An empire built only on power is fragile. Conquerors fall, cities burn, and thrones crumble. But if a kingdom is bound by law, visible, lasting, unchanging, then perhaps it might endure. He set out to create something unprecedented, a body of laws, carved into stone, that would stand above both king and subject. Laws not whispered by judges behind closed doors, not altered at the whim of priests, but fixed for all to see. To understand Hammurabi's vision, we must step into the streets of ancient Babylon. Imagine a crowded marketplace. Merchants haggle over silver and barley. A farmer argues with a trader who sold him a broken plow. A mason claims he was cheated for his work on a house. In a society without clear rules, these disputes could turn violent. The strong could silence the weak, and the poor often had no recourse against the rich. But Hammurabi believed justice was not only a royal duty, it was a divine mandate. Kings were not merely rulers. They were shepherds, entrusted by the gods to protect their people. To govern well meant to ensure that the widow, the orphan, and the powerless were not left defenseless. And so, Hammurabi summoned scribes. He gathered traditions, judgments, decrees from across Mesopotamia. He listened to elders, priests, and governors. From this sea of custom and precedent, he sought to create order, a single, unified code. What emerged was carved into a block of black diorite stone, nearly 7 feet tall, so heavy that no man could move it easily. This was not an ordinary tablet of clay that might crumble or be erased. This was eternal. At the top of the stele, a striking image was etched. Hammurabi standing before Shamash, the sun god of justice. Shamash, seated on his throne of flames, extended to the king the rod and the ring, symbols of authority. The message was unmistakable. These laws did not come from men, but from the gods. To obey them was not merely a civic duty, it was sacred. Beneath this image, in neat columns of cuneiform script, stretched nearly 300 laws, 282 articles in total, covering every aspect of life: trade, marriage, crime, labor, property, debt. For the first time, the principles of justice were not hidden but laid bare, carved into stone for all to witness. The stele was set up in a public place, where any citizen might approach and read. Few could truly decipher the intricate cuneiform, but the presence of the monument was itself a proclamation. The law is here. It is fixed. It applies to all. Now, let us read the stone itself. The laws of Hammurabi speak in a voice both harsh and clear, echoing across millennia. If a man steals from a temple or a palace, he shall be put to death. And the one who receives the stolen goods shall also be put to death. Here was no mercy for sacrilege or treason against the state. Temples and palaces were the heart of society, and to strike at them was to strike at the gods themselves. If a builder constructs a house for a man, and the house collapses and kills the owner, that builder shall be put to death. If it kills the owner's son, then the builder's son shall be put to death. Justice here may seem cruel, but it was also precise. The law demanded accountability, even from craftsmen, ensuring that negligence could not hide behind excuses. In a world without modern insurance or safety codes, the threat of death was the ultimate guarantee of quality. If a son strikes his father, they shall cut off his hand. If a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. If he breaks another man's bone, they shall break his bone. The famous principle emerges: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. To modern ears, it sounds savage, but for its time, it was revolutionary. For in many societies, vengeance knew no limits. A quarrel could escalate until families were exterminated, villages burned, entire clans ruined. Hammurabi's code sought to halt this cycle. Punishment would be proportional to the crime, not greater. The law, in this sense, was not only retribution, it was balance. But Hammurabi's code reached far beyond crime and punishment. It entered the home, the hearth, the most private corners of life. If a man takes a wife, but neglects her, she may leave him and return to her father's house. Marriage in Babylon was both personal and economic. Dowries were exchanged, contracts written. Yet the law recognized the rights of women in ways surprising for the ancient world. A wife abandoned was not left destitute. She could reclaim her dowry and return to her family. If a woman is accused by her husband but not caught in the act of adultery, she shall leap into the river for her trial. Here, the gods themselves were called upon as judge. Survival in the river meant innocence. Drowning meant guilt. It was brutal, yet in an age without juries or forensic evidence, divine judgment seemed the surest test. There were also protections for widows and orphans. If a husband died, his wife could remain in his house, supported by his estate. Orphans were not to be cast aside but provided for. Hammurabi's code, stern though it was, carried within it a recognition of society's most vulnerable. In the bustling economy of Babylon, where silver, grain, and livestock flowed through the markets, disputes were inevitable. The code sought to regulate them all. If a merchant lends grain or silver and the debtor cannot pay, the debtor may work off his debt, but no man shall sell his wife or child for more than 3 years. In the 4th year, they shall go free. Debt slavery was real, but Hammurabi placed limits upon it. No family was to be enslaved forever for a single debt. After 3 years, freedom returned. This law, though harsh to modern minds, was a shield in its time, a restraint against endless bondage. Contracts were recorded on clay tablets. Witnesses were called. The code specified, if a man sells a field, house, or slave without witnesses or a contract, that sale is invalid. The scribes of Babylon became the guardians of commerce, their styluses pressing the rules of society into clay. One can imagine the scene, a dispute in the marketplace. A merchant claims he was cheated in silver. A farmer insists he repaid his debt. Voices rise, tempers flare. Instead of daggers being drawn, the men are led before a judge, who points to the black stone stele. The law is read aloud, its words carved for eternity. If a man owes a debt and cannot pay, let him labor, let his goods be sold, but let not his children be enslaved forever. And with this pronouncement, the quarrel ends. The authority is not the judge himself, nor even Hammurabi standing above them, but the law written in stone. In this, Hammurabi achieved something rare. He transformed justice from the whim of men into the permanence of text. Yet as we read these laws, we must ask, was justice truly equal in Babylon? The answer, as always in history, is complicated. Hammurabi's code divided society into three broad classes: the Awilu, or nobles, the Mushkanu, or commoners, and the Wardu, or slaves. Each stood before the same black stone, but the punishments it decreed were not the same for all. If a noble man destroys the eye of another noble, they shall destroy his eye. But if he destroys the eye of a commoner, he shall pay 1 mina of silver. And if he destroys the eye of a slave, he shall pay half the slave's value. Here we see the stark lines of hierarchy. To injure a man of rank was to risk one's own life or limb. To injure a commoner was costly, but survivable. To injure a slave was, in the eyes of the law, a matter of property. To us, it may seem unjust, but for its time, it was a recognition that even the lowest had some value in law. Slaves could not be killed without consequence. Widows and orphans had explicit protection. This was no utopia, but compared to the lawless vengeance of earlier ages, it was progress. For the people of Babylon, the code was more than words on stone. It was the framework of daily life. Picture a farmer bringing barley to market. He weighs it against silver, careful to use scales inspected by the temple. Why? Because the code declared, if a merchant uses false weights, he shall be put to death. Picture a builder overseeing the construction of a house. He checks every brick, every timber. Why? Because he knows the law. If a house collapses and kills the owner, the builder shall be executed. Picture a woman negotiating her marriage contract. Her family ensures that the dowry is recorded on a clay tablet, witnessed by scribes. Why? Because if the marriage fails, she can reclaim her property, guaranteed by the code. From birth to death, from trade to family, the law was present. It was both shield and sword, protecting some, punishing others, shaping the rhythm of Babylonian life. In the prologue to the code, Hammurabi describes himself not as a tyrant, but as a shepherd. He claims the gods appointed him to cause justice to prevail in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evil, that the strong may not oppress the weak. This image is powerful. The king as shepherd, guiding his flock, wielding law as his crook. It was a message to his people. I do not rule by sword alone, I rule by justice. Of course, Hammurabi was also a conqueror, his wars fierce and bloody. But the code was his attempt to cloak power in legitimacy, to transform rule into order, empire into civilization. Yet we must not romanticize too much. Hammurabi's justice was not gentle. Many crimes were punished by death: theft, adultery, false accusation, sacrilege. Torture and mutilation were not uncommon. Justice was swift, often brutal. But in this brutality lay a strange fairness. The law was known, its punishments predictable. A thief could not claim ignorance. A corrupt merchant could not bribe his way free if the law stood against him. In a land where power so often belonged only to the strong, Hammurabi offered the people a shield, however imperfect. What did ordinary Babylonians think of their code? We cannot know for certain. Their voices do not survive on clay. But we can imagine. A widow spared from destitution by the law that returned her dowry. A farmer protected from unfair loans by the rule of debt limits. A merchant confident that contracts were binding and enforced. A slave, perhaps bitter that his worth was measured in silver, yet aware that even his life carried some legal weight. For some, the code must have seemed like divine justice itself. For others, perhaps, it was a harsh reminder of their place in society. But for all, it was inescapable, carved in stone, standing in the city for all to see. The true genius of Hammurabi was not in any single law, but in the idea that law itself could be written, permanent, and public. Before him, justice was too often the whim of rulers, shifting like the wind. After him, justice could be debated, studied, remembered. Laws could be compared, modified, expanded. The very concept of a legal code was born. This was Hammurabi's gift to history. Not mercy, not equality, but structure. The foundation upon which later civilizations, Assyria, Persia, Rome, would build their own systems of justice. No empire lasts forever. Hammurabi reigned for more than 4 decades, and under him, Babylon was the jewel of Mesopotamia. But after his death, the empire began to falter. His sons lacked his charisma, his generals lacked his brilliance, and his laws, though eternal in stone, could not shield the kingdom from the storms of history. Neighboring powers rose, the Hittites from Anatolia, the Kassites from the Zagros Mountains. They marched on Babylon, and in time the great city was plundered. Hammurabi's dynasty crumbled, and Babylon was swallowed into the shifting tides of Mesopotamian politics. And yet, though kings fell and empires rose, the code endured. Copies were made on clay tablets. Its spirit lingered in the legal traditions of later rulers. Long after Hammurabi's name faded from memory, his laws remained alive in practice. The great black diorite stele, carved with nearly 300 laws, stood tall in Babylon for centuries. But history, as always, is restless. At some point, invaders carried it off, perhaps as a trophy of conquest. It found its way to the city of Susa, in what is now Iran, where it was buried in the ruins of another empire. There it lay, forgotten, for over 2,000 years. The words of Hammurabi slept in silence, hidden beneath earth and stone, while new civilizations rose and fell. Persia, Greece, Rome, Byzantium. Then, in the year 1901, French archaeologists digging in Susa uncovered the stele. Imagine their awe as they brushed away the dust and revealed the ancient cuneiform, line after line sprawling upward to the carved figure of Hammurabi, receiving the law from Shamash. The world's oldest code of law, lost for millennia, had returned to light. Today the stele stands in the Louvre Museum in Paris, towering over visitors from every nation. Its presence is humbling. Here, before your eyes, is the very stone that shaped civilization. Law students, historians, and tourists alike gaze upon it. Some marvel at its severity, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Others admire its clarity, its determination to bind the powerful as well as the weak. All recognize it as a milestone in humanity's endless search for justice. The influence of Hammurabi's code stretches far. The principle of lex talionis, the law of retaliation, echoes in later traditions, from Mosaic law in the Hebrew Bible to the Roman 12 tables. The very concept that law should be written, public, and universal forms the backbone of modern legal systems. In this sense, Hammurabi speaks across the ages. He reminds us that civilization is not built only by warriors and kings, but by scribes, judges, and the idea that rules can be made to outlive men. But the code also confronts us with a paradox. It is both noble and flawed, compassionate and cruel. It protected the weak, but not equally. It upheld contracts, but allowed slavery. It sought fairness, but enforced hierarchy. And in this paradox lies its humanity. For justice itself is never perfect. Every society struggles with it, balancing mercy and punishment, order and freedom, equality and tradition. Hammurabi's laws remind us that the search for justice is as old as civilization itself and as unfinished as tomorrow. Picture Babylon one last time. The sun sets over the ziggurat, casting long shadows across the Euphrates. In the marketplace, merchants pack away their wares. Families gather in courtyards. And in the temple square, the black stone stele stands silent, watching. It has seen kings crowned and kings overthrown. It has seen joy and suffering, triumph and ruin. It has seen Babylon itself fall to dust. And yet, it still speaks. Its voice is the voice of humanity's first attempt to write justice into the world. It whispers to us across 4,000 years. Let the strong not oppress the weak. Let law, not chaos, rule the land. This is the legacy of Hammurabi. This is the story of justice in ancient Babylon.